Good afternoon. I'm Bob Russell, GTU Professor Emeritus of Theology and Science, founder of the Center for Theology and the Natural Sciences, founder, co-editor of Theology and Science, and principal investigator, Virtuous AI. I'm delighted to welcome you this afternoon to our celebration of the completion of CTNS VAI grant. The grant is Virtuous AI ? Cultural Evolution, Artificial Intelligence, and Virtue. We are meeting here at the GTU in Berkeley and online around the world. The VI grant explores three central questions. One, how and to what extent will AI influence the evolution of human culture and virtue? Two, can AI assist humans in the acquisition of virtue? And three, is AI itself capable of virtue? If so, are these virtues shared with or distinct from human virtues? Personally, I think that the third question is the most unusual and far-reaching, and the three together lead to exciting and very fertile research, as we will explore in some detail this afternoon. The VAI grant is supported by a $450K grant from the John Templeton Foundation and represents the most recent of over $20 million in grant funding to CTNS from JTF. By adopting the novel idea of an entirely online program, we were able to redirect funds from massive travel expenses to triple the number of participants from international locations and with interdisciplinary and interreligious dimensions. They were organized into three virtual conferences in locations located in the time zones surrounding Seoul, Berkeley, and Rome. Each conference was 4 days long. Participants were required to read the conference papers in advance, an idea we learned years ago to get better participation, and devote all of the conference time discussing them. The result is some 60 groundbreaking research papers that are now being published worldwide, including papers in our CTNS journal, Theology and Science, and in our upcoming new VEI edited volume. We're developing new courses at the GTU and elsewhere, focused on both seminary students and doctoral candidates. We are supporting conferences on a variety of campuses and at the American Academy of Religion. I am immensely grateful to Dr. Braden Mollick for co-directing the VI project. With an undergraduate degree in biology and a PhD in ethics here at the GTU, Braden is the director of CTNS, and he holds the endowed A.M.G. Barber Chair in Theology, Science, and now expanded to Ethics and Technology here at CTNS GTU. Braden has worked on all dimensions of VI, from drafting the grant application several years ago, enlisting the dozens of international scholars to join the project, chairing all the online conferences, shepherding the revisions and submissions of conference papers for publication, organizing today's event, and much more. I also want to thank Chang Yen Song, who, while pursuing his PhD here at the GTU, gave Braden crucial support for the project, including creating our VAI website, handling communication with conference participants, and overseeing all computer and video activities. His doctoral research includes the neurosciences and Christian theology. I'm grateful for our two senior advisors for helping make this project extraordinary. Dr. Brian Patrick Green, who is Director of Technology Ethics at the Markula Center for Applied Ethics, Santa Clara University, and Dr. Thomas H. Arnold, Research Associate at Tufts University, who specializes in human-robot interactions. Well, it's time to dive into today's conversations. Please join me in welcoming Braden, who will lead our discussion.
Okay, well, my goal today is to give you some history about how the grant got started, to dive into a few more details, as Bob said, about the nature of the grant itself and some of the details, and then talk about some of the work that's come out since the conferences. So, as a graduate of the Graduate Theological Union here, say that 10 times fast, I was working at the center, and I was also serving as an adjunct lecturer at Santa Clara University in the School of Engineering. And there I was teaching courses like software ethics and ethical issues in bioengineering. It was a very different perspective from college seniors and master's students who are mostly engineers going on to want to work for the big tech companies. I once had a student say their final paper was going to be late because they were negotiating their contract with TikTok. And I wanted to say, well, I think you need to graduate before you can take the job. But the topics they were most interested in exploring included gene editing, autonomous vehicles, computer brain interfaces, and artificial intelligence. Now, around that time, Ted Peters, who's with us today, and the co-founder of Theology and Science, our journal, was putting together a special issue on the Genetic Virtue Project. And the question was sort of surrounded whether or not gene editing could be used to engineer virtue in humans. And I thought that this was a very good model for looking at the intersection of science, religion, ethics, and technology, especially from a perspective that wanted to incorporate virtue. So I thought, how might this apply to other situations? For example, the issue of artificial intelligence and virtue. And that's really how we started to develop the three sets of the core questions that Bob mentioned already. How and to what extent will AI influence the evolution of human culture and virtue? Can AI assist humans in the acquisition of virtue? And is AI itself capable of virtue? And if so, are those virtues shared or distinct from human virtues? So we gave scholars the choice to engage with these questions however they wanted. Ideally, we wanted them to sort of have at least one question in mind, but they could look at two questions if they wanted to, and some scholars actually touched upon aspects of all three. But we didn't ask them to necessarily identify explicitly exactly which questions they were engaging with, although we wanted a general sense. And for the most part, many of the scholars explore two questions, or at least aspects of two of the questions. Usually the first and the second, or the second and the third, because I think there's some meaningful overlap between those questions. So when we look at this first question here, how and to what extent will AI influence the evolution of human culture and virtue? This is maybe the broadest question, and also maybe the most familiar question for people that are already thinking about artificial intelligence. Some of the topics that people explored in their papers were the environmental impact of AI and how it might be able to help address environmental concerns, how specific kinds of algorithms, maybe recommender algorithms, for example, affect the ways in which people search and think. There were also a paper on trends in digital religion and whether or not AI is being worshipped or being used in worship. The kinds of values that should be incorporated into AI research, promises and perils of AI, and the ways in which AI can contribute to a healthier and more sustainable society. How AI can contribute to misinformation and a breakdown of truth and communication that can lead to societal breakdown. So as you can see, some very positive and also some very alarming topics. And that trend went throughout all three questions. There were definitely people who were more optimistic and people who were more pessimistic. So the second question, can AI assist humans in the acquisition of virtue, might be the most straightforward of the three questions. It seems a very yes or no sort of answer. But this question can overlap with concerns in the first set of questions and the last set of questions, but in different ways. So some of the topics that people who explored this question looked at, if we were looking at it in terms of cultural evolution, they might say, well, how is AI affecting human decision-making processes, including moral deliberation? And how might that then impact our ability to acquire or exercise virtue? There are also concerns about human de-skilling, that if we let AI help us or AI take over decisions, that humans will no longer be able to do the kinds of things that we do, make the kinds of decisions that we make, the concerns that come with that for society as well as individuals. And then issues of human enhancement and transhumanism. This is where things like brain-computer interfaces or gene editing might enter the conversation. People like Elon Musk who would say that we need AI within our own brains in order to be able to have any chance of keeping up or competing with artificial intelligence. And so questions about whether or not that makes sense, how we would go about doing that. And then also within this category is, can AI provide spiritual guidance to humans, whether that is in the form of a chatbot, whether that could be AI or robotic clergy, apps. There are a variety of ways in which people look to explore that. Very interestingly, the weekend before our first online conference, there was a celebration, I believe a 300-year centennial in Germany, and an entire service in a Protestant church was created using artificial intelligence. The music, the homily were all created using AI from a professor from Vienna. So it was a very timely thing that happened right before our first conference. And then the third question, as Bob said, perhaps the most thought-provoking, but also the most controversial, is AI itself capable of virtue? And if so, are those virtues shared with or distinct from human virtues? Some scholars dismissed the idea entirely and said that, well, my car doesn't have virtue. There's no way that artificial intelligence would be able to have virtue. But if we tried to identify which questions scholars might have looked at in their papers, I would say that anywhere from a third to half of the 60 conference papers that we had touched upon some aspect of this question. So it was a very popular question to engage with from our scholars. But it did seem that some people made assumptions as well. For those who were dismissive of the idea of AI being capable of virtue, there was a tendency for them to define virtues as moral virtues. And therefore, if AI does not have emotion, it could not have moral virtue. There were also arguments that AI right now is not intelligent. And so therefore, if it's not intelligent, if it's not self-conscious, it cannot have virtue, or that it's not embodied. So it's not going to have virtues in the way that we could. So for instance, the virtue of temperance. How does AI think of temperance if it needs electricity to run, but it can't get too much electricity, as we might get too many calories in our daily lives. And then different traditions sometimes arrived at similar conclusions, but through different methods. So we had a variety of perspectives, both philosophical and theological, when it came to virtue. We had people that used Aristotle, Aquinas, MacIntyre, Hume, and from theological traditions, we had Christian traditions. We had Buddhist, Confucian, Taoist, Muslim, and might be missing something, but a very broad use of virtue, which many scholars found to be helpful, sort of taking them out of their own tradition and being able to learn and draw from other traditions. Some folks said that it might be possible for AI to have virtue, though others said that this might only happen in specific contexts or in specific ways. And then finally here, this virtue may be quite different from human virtue, virtue of AI, that is. And again, this comes down to issues of embodiment or issues of the role that AI might have in society versus the role that humans have in society. So, as Bob said, initially the plan when we were first writing the grant was to have 3 international conferences, but we found that in order to have hotels and travel and the space there, that was going to take up the majority of the grant. And so we decided to pivot to have 3 online, but still internationally flavored conferences, meaning that we had a Berkeley conference where most participants were from North and South America. And this was June 12th through 15th in 2003, 9 a.m. Pacific time. And if you want some more information, you can go to our website, and there's links to all the conferences and the schedules. And I'll talk a little bit more about the work that Chang did with the videos as well. The Seoul Conference, where most of the participants were from Asia. And this was held July 11th through 14th, 2023. 4 p.m. Pacific time, 8 a.m. Korean Standard Time. So again, I see we have some folks from that time joining us now. Thank you for coming early on a Saturday morning. And then we had the Rome Conference, which is participants came mostly from the UK, Europe, and West Asia. This is July 24th, 27th, 2023. This is 7 a.m. Pacific time, so early for us, and then late in the day for folks working at Central European time. Here we have the schedule for the Berkeley conference. People could publicly attend this online for the first 3 days, and we tried to roughly do one question per day. So the first day tended to be papers that dealt with the first question, although that would often bleed into the second question as well. And then the very last morning of the fourth day was a chance for the scholars who participated in that conference to talk amongst each other, to give feedback. And that was the same sort of schedule that we had for all of the conferences. So you can see the names of the participants in the Berkeley conference here. The Seoul conference had the smallest number of participants. So you can see the breakdown in time here. We would usually have about 2 or 3 papers and then some time for, well, participants were given a half-hour total. And we were hoping that that would be roughly spent 15 minutes presenting, summarizing things in their paper, although everybody had read them, and then 15 minutes for question, maybe 10 minutes presentation, 20-minute question, if we can. And then after a couple papers, we would then have some time for general conversation. So 1 or 2 sessions like that in the morning, 1 or 2 sessions like that in the afternoon, the same thing for a couple days. And then here's the schedule for the Rome conference. Again, 2 or 3 papers grouped together. We tried to group them together based on some type of similarity in terms of either topic or maybe the ways in which they were approaching virtue, which was a challenge when we were looking at 60 scholars from across the world, looking at things in different ways. But I think we were pretty effective at putting together things. So all in all, we had about 60 conference papers, and most of these were recorded and can be found on our YouTube channel. Our YouTube channel here is youtube.com/CTNS-GTU. And there's a playlist available for each of these. Chang'an took the video files from Zoom and edited them into individual recordings for each of the speakers, and then the question and answers, and put together these playlists. So if you're interested in going through each conference sort of after the fact in the way that was presented, you'd be able to do that. So in addition to the conferences, we also then had events post these conferences, many of which happened here, but not all of which. So our annual Russell Family Fellowship, actually one week right the day before that. So on Wednesday, November 8th, 2023, Ted Peters and I led a conversation on AI in the church that was co-sponsored by GTU affiliate New College Berkeley at a church in Silicon Valley, where we had about 40 to 50 people in person at a panel discussion that looked at issues around the perils and promise of AI. And then shortly after that, we had our 2023-2024 Russell Family Fellowship, the Public Forum, and the Research Conference. And the fellow that year was Brian Patrick Green, one of our senior advisors for the grant. For his Public Forum, he asked the question, should God have given humans technology? Considerations of nuclear weapons, space technologies, synthetic biology, and artificial intelligence. And then Friday, November 10th, the research conference itself was Emerging Technologies as Provocations for Theology and Ethics. And September 30th, 2004, we had one of our conference participants, Dr. Cyrus Olson, talk about work that he's been doing with AI and medicine, both in the United States and with colleagues in Uganda. And then recently, this past semester, well, just a couple weeks ago, last month, we had a public forum with a visiting scholar, Dr. Anna Puzio, on post-human visions and how they're transforming anthropology of technology. And then, in addition to CTNS related events, I also was out there doing my best to talk about the kinds of things that we were exploring in VAI. So in 2023, this is actually in between our Berkeley conference and our Seoul conference, the International Society for Science and Religion invited us to submit 3 people to come give a plenary session at their meeting, their 2023 conference, Artificial and Spiritual Intelligences, which is a wrapping up of their own Templeton project on multiple forms of intelligence. And so myself, Catherine Johnson, and Lawrence Whitney, who were both participants in the Berkeley conference, three of us went to the UK to the conference in Swindon, and we gave a plenary session on the AI where I gave an overview of the project, and then both Catherine and Lawrence talked about their own work, which Catherine is part of an interdisciplinary team in Arizona State that's looking at virtuous drivers and trying to then see how AI might be able to incorporate the way that virtuous drivers behave in self-driving vehicles. And Lawrence Whitney is a theologian, but a comparative theologian. So he was looking at Confucian role ethics and how that might intersect with Western understandings of virtue and how that interplays with artificial intelligence. And then at the fall meeting of the Sinai and Synapses, which is an interfaith fellowship group on science and religion, I presented on artificial intelligence, deepening digital divides. And at their alumni meeting, I also presented For Whose Purposes, Technology, Human Action, and Religion. As I mentioned before, Ted and I presented co-sponsored event with New College Berkeley, AI in the Church. I was a respondent at Brian's Fellowship Conference. I was also asked by the International Society for Science and Religion to talk about the VAI grant at the American Academy of Religion. ISSR has a session at AAR every year, and they were looking at three AI projects. They were looking at Orion Hertzfeld's latest book on artificial intelligence. They were looking at the ISSR's own program on multiple intelligences, and then CTNS's VAI project. And then at the Artificial Intelligence and Religion Seminar, I gave part of my paper from the conferences we had, AI and Justice, Furthering the Digital Divide and Disrupting Human Prudence. And then last fall at AAR, I gave a paper, Affective Computer-Brain Interfaces and Moral Enhancement, Issues of Control and the Acquisition of an Acquired and Infused Virtue, which is a co-sponsored unit, session of the Bioethics Unit and the Science, Technology, and Religion Unit at the American Academy of Religion. So another thing that came out during this time was Ted Peters decided that he wanted to have a second edition of a book that he had. And this one is entitled The Promise and Peril of AI and IA, Intelligence Amplification. New Technology Meets Religion, Theology, and Ethics. And I'm going to ask Ted to come up and say a little bit about that and say some things about the grant. But as you can see, here are some of the chapters in the book that participants from the grant provided text for. So a lot of overlap between that and Ted's own work.
You heard Braden say that on November 3, 2023, he and I were invited down to a church congregation in Silicon Valley. And we listed 8 or 10 research questions from the CTNS project. 40 or 50 people showed up, 35 of whom were software engineers at the various corporations there in Silicon Valley. And when we were done, they came up and they were so thankful. They kept saying, thank you for taking on these issues in the church. We talk about them all the time over coffee, but you're doing it systematically. We thank the church. I have a term for this. I call it public theology. And my definition of public theology is conceived in the church, critically analyzed in the academy, and then offered to the world for the sake of the common good. So this congregation was offering to the world, in this case, the world of Silicon Valley, something of value for the common good. That's where I place a lot of the work of CTNS in general and the Virtuous AI project specifically. Oh, maybe 10 years or so ago, you can see the name Arvin Gao up there. He and I and Brian Patrick Green, who was mentioned a little while ago, thought that transhumanism could be a very important movement within culture. And so we started attending transhumanist meetings. We got to know them. We had some exploratory seminars here at the University of California, Berkeley. And as the years rolled by, we could see the development of religious transhumanism. There's a Christian transhumanism, there's a Buddhist transhumanism, there's a Unitarian transhumanism. So we put our minds together and we published an edited book, maybe 2017, I think, on religious transhumanism and its critics. Well, within transhumanism, artificial intelligence is important. And initially we said, well, artificial intelligence is not intelligent, who cares? But as the progress in artificial intelligence developed, we thought maybe this, independently of transhumanism, is going to have a big impact. And so around 2018, maybe I published the first version of this edited book on artificial intelligence and transhumanism. I was really happy then when Bob and Braden came up with the JTF grant and formulated questions that I think are important for two reasons, and I'll give those two reasons in a moment. And while the grant is going on, we have the big volcanic explosion in the fall of 2023 and bleeding into 2024, where the Silicon Valley techies themselves suddenly start shaking in their boots over two threats from AI. Number one, will artificial general intelligence and superintelligence take over and render the human race extinct? And then the second one was, what if bad actors get a hold of the databases that run the world, and decide to exact tyranny? And if you remember, in the summer of 2023, they went to Congress and said, pass laws, guardrails to protect the planet. That was 2023. Jeffrey Hinton, Elon Musk, Peter Thiel, all of those leaders. Ask them now, huh? The new big, beautiful bill has a clause in it that says no government regulations for 10 years on AI. Big difference between 2023 and 2025. So the thinking through of the ethical implications of AI on the part of the CTNS group and similar research groups around the world, in principle, offers something to the wider society on public policy. So that's one value. Here's another value. Theoretically, I have noticed, and others have noticed, that the transhumanists, even though for them the highest value is intelligence, they don't have a definition of intelligence. And if you look carefully at the artificial intelligence techies, they don't have a definition of intelligence either. So some philosophers, and I'm thinking right now of Noam Chomsky at MIT, says intelligence has virtue built right within it. If you define intelligence, you have to include orientation towards or against virtue. So there's a sense in which what Braden and Bob are doing here is they're actually tapping into a conversation, a controversy that's already there, and providing a way to bring theological, philosophical, and moral resources in order to analyze it. And therefore, I think that the VAI project is the right program at the right time. And even though we end up with more questions than we do answers, I think the systematic thinking and the drawing, and Whitehead said philosophy begins with assemblage. The drawing or assembling of such a wide variety of important issues and orienting them towards virtue, towards ethics, towards public policy has really been a great contribution of this group. And as you all know, the story of AI is just beginning. It's not over. And in one form or another, I certainly hope that the CTNS conversation continues.
And if you'd like another example of what Ted's talking about in terms of public theology and AI, if you Google GTUX, Ted and I created a GTUX original where we drew upon some of the resources from the VAI conferences and have a 6-video series that looks at sort of what do we mean by artificial intelligence, misinformation, the environmental impact, and then issues of virtue as well. So I encourage you, if you haven't seen that yet, to give them a look. And then here are some things that we have done since the grant, or since these other events and conferences that we talked about. Our hope was always to have people publish the work that they had done and to continue to draw upon the resources that they had from the conferences and do work. So we've asked the folks that were participants in the conferences to let us know what they're still up to and let us know how they've published their work or what they're doing. And we've been working on several publication fronts on our own end. So that's what we'd like to share now. A lot of this goes into a final grant report, and not everybody other than the funder always gets to read that. So I think it's a nice opportunity for people to see what else is developed through the grant. So there's not really a distinctive order to this per se. A visiting scholar we had here from Iran, but was with us at the GTU at this time, Hamid Azizi, was invited as a guest speaker for the course Special Topics in AI for the master's students in AI at the University of Mazaratana. And this is in the fall semester of 2024. Robert Gerasi, the paper that he delivered, the study of religion as a tool for the design of technology, in the AI and Faith Research Seminar, drew upon some of the work that he was doing in his VAI paper. Mark Graves, who is also associated with AI and Faith, and that's something I should say that Ted is one of the people who got us connected with the folks at AI and Faith. Ted being an advisor himself, along with Brian Patrick Green, and that connection with that nonprofit group in Seattle has been very, very formative and very helpful. So Mark was building upon his work in VAI, a presentation that he was accepted to give at AAR this November. And the AI and Religion unit called Constructing an AI Moral Agent. And in the fall of 2024, he taught a course at the University of San Francisco on AI, faith, and ethics, and included one of those courses, one of those class sessions on virtue, discernment, and moral awareness, which included material on virtuous AI in general and his own contribution to the conference. And at AI and Faith, they wrote up the participation of VAI fellows that participated in our conferences for their website and their newsletter. And there's the link. We'll have these slides up on our website in case you want to follow up on any of these. Min Sung Kim said that the VAI conference significantly contributed to shaping my perspectives on AI. I'm scheduled to present a paper at the Human Machine Communication Interest Group of the International Communication Association 2025. The paper titled Pursuing the Divine via Intelligent Machines, Contemplating the Salvific Essence of AI, delves into the complex relationship between humanity and artificial intelligence, focus on narratives that depict AI as godlike entities. This paper is currently undergoing revisions for resubmissions to the Journal of Religious Ethics, which is something we'll come back to in a couple minutes. Cyrus Olson has given presentations, Faith Informed Reflection Machines, FIRM, and Trauma Care, part of an Oxford collaboration on theology and artificial intelligence, virtually presented in May 8th, 2025. The public forum he gave here at the GTU, Virtuous AI, Perspectives on Prudential Judgment in Medicine from the US and Uganda. Data Science, Health, and Spirituality in Uganda for the Data Science Institute and the St. Ignatius Institute Lane Center, University of San Francisco, right around the same time in September 24. AI, Ambient Technologies, and Compassion in Healthcare, Science Summit at UNGA 79, September 18th, 2024. And Religion and LLM Design for Healthcare Professionals for AI, Compassion and Health, One Body, Many Gifts, the Diversity of Divine and Human Endeavor, American Scientific Affiliation, July 27th, 2024. Derek Sherman, his work that he did at the VI conference also resulted in an ASA, American Scientific Affiliation, online diving deeper discussion, recorded March 9th, 2024. And Drawin Majoyo, last summer participated in Lumen Christie's seminar, Artificial Intelligence, Ethics, and Catholic Thought, in collaboration with Fonts Vitae Initiative, alongside several dozen other participants from academia and tech professionals. We shared our projects and struggles with the advancement of AI in relation to CST, human dignity, and theological anthropology. I also got a chance to present the development of my VEI project with them. It was a great opportunity to hear interdisciplinary feedback. Ted Peters and Marius Durabantu, another conference participant, both were head speakers at a Yale Divinity School AI conference on April 10th to 11th this past spring, 2025. And our own Chen Song expanded his research interest to general applications and future projections regarding AI. In January of 2025, a presentation called Imago Dei in the Age of Science, Reimagining the Image of God and the Role of the Local Church. It was a presentation he gave at Lafayette Orinda Presbyterian Church, where he presented how the traditional concept of the image of God is facing challenges raised by AI with the applications in local congregations. And then in March 2025, Image of God in the Age of Science, Reimagining the Image of God. Similarly, at Notre Dame HPS Annual Conference 2025 on Science and Imagination, co-hosted by the John J. Riley Center and the University of Notre Dame. I dealt with the same topic, the image of God, but highlighted more on how current technologies, including AI, pose a challenge to the Christian tradition. And also in March of this year, the future of the church communities in a digital age, in light of generative AI, is a presentation that Cheng-En gave at the Western regional meeting of the AAR. In this presentation, I covered the case of generative AI and its potential impact on local congregations. Ron Cole Turner, a Berkeley conference participant, said that his work with CTNS VEI was helpful in making revisions to a chapter that will appear in a book to be published by Springer and edited by Timothy Knepper and Seth Villegas. It is part of a series of 3 books based on a multi-year lecture series at Drake University, part of Springer's Comparative Philosophy of Religion publishing series. He delivered his lecture in 2023 before VAI, but his revisions, however, included substantial additions to the AI section of the paper, and this work was done this past March and April. Robert Gerasi currently has Impress with another conference participant, one of his collaborators, Yong-Sup Song, Cultural Theology and Social Robotics, the Intersection of Science and Religion and Ethical AI. Mark Graves has the paper that he presented at the VAI conference being published in the upcoming issue of Theology and Science, which is something we'll come to in another couple minutes. He's also planning to contribute 2 chapters to the edited volume for VAI, one which will be a further development of his own work with a working title of Constructing an AI Virtuous Agent, and the other chapter is with 3 Buddhist colleagues and will take a Buddhist perspective on the topic. Based on my paper, Gracing Social Technical Virtue, I built upon the orthodox aspect of gracing virtue to present a co-authored paper on deification in the age of artificial intelligence with Lazar Supik at the International Post-Human and Artificial Intelligence Conference, Athens, Greece, in November 2024. The paper from that presentation is to be published with the academic journal Analogia. Noreen Hertzfeld's paper from the conferences will be published in Robot, Pray for Me, by Albert Verlag, 2025. Susan Kennedy, who was a participant in the Seoul conference, published a version of the paper she presented in the American Philosophical Quarterly. And Min Soo Kim, after the VAI conference, one of the key follow-up activities is the publication of the book titled Intelligent Machines as Radicalized Other Towards Authentic Encounters, addresses the often overlooked social and cultural dimension of robotics and artificial intelligence. This book examines how human attitudes towards robotics and AI reflect broader social and philosophical implications. DK, the research that he conducted and presented at the VAI conferences has led to 2 publications. The first is a paper that he presented at conference. The paper that he presented at the conference was included as a chapter in the volume we talked about from Ted Peters, The Promise and Peril of AI and IA. This chapter was Artificial Religious Agents, a study of theoretical feasibility and normative considerations. And the second was additional research following the conference resulted in the publication of a new article, Are Religious Machines Possible? Embodied Cognition, AI, and Religious Behavior, published in Zygon. Cyrus Olson, as we've heard several times already, has a couple peer review articles, Prudential Judgment, Religious Ethics, and AI, ML, and Emergency Care, currently under review at the Journal of Religious Ethics. And Compassionate AI and the Alignment Problem, Theology and Science, the spring of 2024, co-authored with Mark Graves, Jane Thompson, Ali Reza Barjani, and Thomas Arnold, which is published in February 11, 2024. Wookju Park will be a part of the special issue in Theology and Science. He partially integrated the conference content into his recent book, Artificial Intelligence and the Existence of the Soul, which was published in April of this year in Korea. Greg Peterson, the paper that he presented at the conference is currently under review at the Journal of Religious Ethics, Advancing AI, Moral Engagement, Moral Enhancement, and the Need for Niebuhrian Virtues of Moral Vigilance. And Derek Sherman published his paper in Perspectives on Science and Christian Faith, entitled Virtue and Artificial Intelligence. Fraser Watts, upon revising his paper, he published it in Christian Perspectives on Science and Technology as part of a special issue of that journal, which he co-edited. And it includes papers from two other papers on virtue and AI, Zachary Seals and Alec Rusnick. Eudaimonia, with the AI in the word eudaimonia highlighted, Virtue Ethics and Artificial Intelligence Symbiosis. Marius Dilibantu, A for artificial, but also alien, why AI's virtues will be different from ours. Alan Weisenbacher, again, two chapters in Ted's book, but the one from the conference was AI and Storyteller and Mentor, the Pedagogical Potential for AI and Moral Development, was published in AI and IA, Utopia or Extinction, the second edition. Simeon Su presented a short paper at the VAI conference, and the full paper has been published in Perspectives on Science and Christian Faith, entitled How Virtuous Can Artificial Intelligence Become? Explore an Artificial Moral Advisor in Light of the Thomistic Idea of Virtue. And then myself, I have a chapter in Ted's volume, Reflections on the Virtuous AI Project. And I also have a paper under review with the Journal of Religious Ethics. Ali Reza Barjani, the paper Islamic Metaethics and Ethical or Virtuous AI is published in Ted's edited volume. Lawrence Whitney's Confucian Role Ethics and Artificial Intelligence is published in Ted's volume. Michael Paulus, The Meaning of the City and the Library, Harnessing the Newest Form of Artificial Agency, is published in Ted's edited volume. Toby Ife Adediran's Communal and Mystical and Deontic Morality and African Thought, An Ethical Tension for Virtuous AI, is to be published in the special issue for BAI. Brian Patrick Green's Artificial Intelligence and the Future Evolution of Human Virtue and Human Culture, Future Evolution of Virtue and Human Culture, will be published in the VAI edited volume. Mark Graves' Gracing of Socio-Technical Virtues is in the forthcoming issue of Theology and Science. Shannon French's Blood, Sweat, and Tears, Where Artificial Virtue Falls Short, is published, but I don't have a reference for that. Thomas Arnold's What Must We Mean What a Robot Says? Norms, Ordinary Language, and Caring About AI Virtue is to be published in the VAI edited volume. as well as Jung Kim's artificial intelligence and the sustainable future of co-creation. Bob had talked about some courses and some other things that are being designed. Our colleagues, Hamid Azizi, Asghar Sabiri, Mehdi Golshani, Yusuf Jamali, and Mohammed Jamali. At CPSF, we've launched a minor program in philosophy of science, which includes courses such as philosophy of artificial intelligence and philosophy of mind. These courses directly engage with themes raised during the VEI conferences, as well as a new course entitled Law and Artificial Intelligence was also introduced at the master's program of law at Shiraz University, integrating many key discussions from the VEI conferences. Wokju Park has integrated some of his work in university teaching, a substantial portion of the presentation from his conference presentation into his graduate level course, AI and Religion, which he currently teaches at Yonsei University. Imperial is used for both lecture and discussion. About 2 years ago now, 2 springs ago, Ted Nag taught a new course at the GTU, Theology and Science and AI, incorporating themes and papers from the conferences. And I also include a section on AI in my ethics and technology course here at the GTU. And then one thing that the Templeton Foundation asks is, how did the work from the grant sort of influence people's research? And at least for me, it made me think more about the interplay between acquired and infused virtue, and how both AI and humans might be able to receive infused virtue from one another, which is something I'd like to continue to explore. But I started to do that in my paper on computer-brain interfaces and acquired and infused virtue at last year's American Academy of Religion. Some other comments that people have given us. Robert Gerasi says that the ongoing work with Professor Yong-Sup Song, now at Seoul Christian University, they hope to share the VI work with Korean scholars on Robert Sachs' visit. And he's also going to do some overview writing for the Edgar L.R. Handbook of Religion and AI, which will reflect what I've learned from working on the VEI project. Robert actually emailed me today saying that due to a family emergency, he would not be able to join us, but was very grateful to be a part of the project, and he really appreciated the global and interreligious aspects of the project. Suraj Halongduran said after the VEI conferences, he received last year a grant from the National Research Council of Thailand on AI ethics from the ground up, which aims at uncovering the foundation for AI ethics based on local cultures. The theme of the project was developed out of the discussion at the GTU virtual conference. Many publications on this broad theme came out of the project. The idea of searching for the foundation of ethics, AI ethics, took shape during my participation in the conference. My paper, AI Virtue and Cultural Evolution, tries to answer the question arising from the relation between AI and the virtues. This has become a guiding theme of my research until the present day. Thus, the conference plays a crucial role in the development of my thought, for which I'm very grateful. Cyrus Olson currently has a collaboration with Oxford on theology and artificial intelligence. He also works with the Foundation for Social Connection. That's an expert consultant for AI and youth, and he's also a research fellow now with AI and faith. Alan Weisenbacher, who's also managing editor of Theology and Science, said that he shared his paper with the computer science department here at UC Berkeley, and their representative wrote and said that they thought it was really thought-provoking, and they're impressed with how well he understood video games, and was looking forward to mulling this over in the next couple of weeks. His research taught me a lot about video games and video game development and what makes games successful in imparting moral lessons and the reasons why some games with that purpose fail. And then we had some anonymous comments. I won't read through all of these. Some of these are quite long, but here, the beginning of this one says, a tremendous opportunity to receive detailed feedback on my work, given the pre-read format, a great opportunity to learn about the research of and network with scholars in my cohort, and a wonderful experience overall. The diversity of perspectives shared during the Seoul conference expanded my understanding of virtue ethics as I got to dig deeper into Aristotle and Aquinas and learn more about non-Western approaches, including Confucianism and Taoism. This VI conference was a crucial building block for my work on AI ethics, not only helping to develop my own ideas by writing and presenting a paper, but helping to develop my ideas by learning from so many different perspectives around the world. This was a truly unique grant that generated an enormous global impact for a relatively small cost. Everything that I've done since this conference has relied upon ideas I developed either for my paper or thanks to the papers of others who presented at one of the 3 VEI conferences. The international aspect of this conference was truly remarkable. I really liked the strategy of having the conference virtually in 3 different time zones, but each still accessible to folks in the US. Learning from the folks from Asia and Africa was especially interesting and useful, since those perspectives on AI are sometimes few or completely missing from the conversation. This project definitely encouraged me to think about some aspects of Korean religious history and what I otherwise might not have considered. Even more important, I was able to think about what religion does and how it could be a part of my religion, AI reflections. What I liked about the virtue framing, as opposed to ethics, is precisely that virtue is really only that when it's engaged in the world. In my own work, I considered the question of virtue within the sense of what the world ought to be like and how religion attempts to operationalize that in limited ways. The AI conference allowed me to expand my horizon beyond neuroscience, which is my expertise, to AI as well. Much of the neuroscience research indeed relies on using AI to create stimuli, run scripts, and analyze data. However, the VAI conference widened my scope to further applications of technology, including especially in building an architecture with moral criteria. As the current trend moves forward to develop advanced AI beyond LLM, I think that VAI started a discussion quite early before the majority began to have an interest in AI agents who can cultivate, display, and even inspire virtue. Overall, the VAI conference enabled me to deepen my engagement with the metaphysical dimensions of AI, particularly questions concerning the plausibility of AI attaining human-level intelligence and exhibiting religious behaviors. Through presentations and discussions with other participants, I was able to expand my perspectives beyond metaphysical inquiry to more practical and ethical dimensions. These insights are now informing my current research on the theological contributions to ethical guidelines for AI development. What I found particularly valuable about the VAI conference was the opportunity to engage closely with a wide range of perspectives from scholars who share a serious interest in this field. So we still have some things that are outstanding, some things we still need to do. The first of these is that the August issue of Theology and Science will include a special issue with papers from the VAI grant. These include The Virtuous Well, Religion, Culture, and the Depth of Artificial Intelligence by Robert Gerasi, Exploring LLM Chatbots as Potential Guidelines for Virtue Ethics, Limits and Possibilities with a Case Study on Euthanasia by Anne Gerdes and Peter Olstrom. Artificial Intelligence and Human Spirituality, Is a Chatbot a Good Idea by Ron Cole Turner. Recalculating the Future of Humanity, Homo Cyberneticus 2.0 by Jose Funes S.J. Gracing the Socio-Technical Virtues by Mark Graves. Non-Human Agents, Exploring Modern AI Through the Lens of Contemporary Ontology and Theology by Hugo Rufiner, Jose Funes, Mariano Asla, Leonardo Giovanni, and Enrique Alberto Majul. And A Foundation Between Virtuous Humans and Virtuous AI Robots by Chen-Yang Li. We are also waiting comments from the editors from the Journal of Religious Ethics. We had gone through one layer of revisions, and we're hoping that we'll be able to move forward with publication on what they call a focus issue on AI and religion. And that has papers from Cyrus Olson, Greg Peterson, Lillian Abidal, Min So Kim, and myself. We're also looking to publish an edited volume of papers from the VEI conferences, work that people have developed since the original conferences, and insight from additional scholars whose work aligns with the core questions of the VEI grant that we've learned about since the start. Our goal is to finalize the list of contributors this summer and secure a publisher for the volume. So I just want to end with some thank yous. We want to thank the John Templeton Foundation for making this grant possible and for their financial support. The project would not have been as successful as it was without the participants, so we thank them for their time, effort, and insights. We also would like to thank the GTU for institutional and administrative support. Special thanks to the VEI grant staff, our principal investigator, Bob Russell, and our student support, Cheng-Yin Son, as well as our senior advisors, Brian Patrick Green and Thomas Arnold. And I want to thank you, those of you who are here in person and online, for being here and celebrating the work of the grant. we look forward to seeing how this work continues to develop and for the possibility of future partnerships. Thank you very much. So I think at this time, if there are folks that are joining us here in person or in Zoom that were participants in the project and would like to share anything, or if people have any questions, we'd be happy to take some time with that. Bob, yeah.
Thanks, but amazing encyclopedia of papers that you shared with us. That was really great. I want to go back to question 3 and just get your sense of the overall response. You say that more people felt that AI could develop virtue, and if so, would it be mostly like human virtue or mostly different from it?
In case people online couldn't hear, I'll just rephrase the question. Bob was asking about scholars' interpretation of question number 3 and whether or not the work they did in their papers and since then, whether or not they support the idea of AI as being capable of virtue, and whether that virtue would be similar to or different from human virtue. And I would say that there really was a division in responses. There are people that completely reject the idea of AI of being capable of virtue whatsoever. And I think for those people, they are thinking of virtue that is similar to human virtue. I would say on the opposite extreme, we have people like Marius Dorobantu, whose whole paper was trying to imagine and create virtues that AI that interacts with the world in a fundamentally different way in terms of kinds of radiation that it could see or other sensory ways that it could interact in the world that are distinct from humans. Sense of time that AI and computing power would experience different than humans. So I would say that's the broad category, the broad spectrum. And then within that, you do have folks from a variety of religious traditions who would say, I think someday AI might be capable of virtue, but that virtue is going to be different than humans. Then I would say there was also a category of people who would say AI is built on our understanding of human intelligence in some capacity. Although, as Ted said, we might not have a great definition of what we mean by intelligence, but at least in trying to use things like neural networks that are based on existing animal neural networks, there could be more similarities between AI virtue and human virtue than we might otherwise consider. So I would say that at least those 4 different positions and others are all represented in the perspectives from the conferences. Sure.
So as a Christian ethicist yourself, what do you think?
I think that right now, AI cannot have acquired virtue. But I think where I'm at in my work is to say that AI might be able to receive infused virtue from human developers. And that likewise, AI might be able to infuse us with virtue. Although I have misgivings about that, given the nature of things like hallucinations and just wrong information that large language models give us. And so I would say that as much as the virtue is possible, the vice is also possible, which has always been a part of the question, but we've tended to leave that the darker side sort of unspoken. But I think that a number of conference participants have raised that and say we need to be explicit about that.
Final follow-up question. What about virtuous AI that's distinct from human virtue? Is that plausible?
Oh, I think so. Yeah, and I tend to agree with Marius there, in that if AI is embodied in a different way than humans are, then I would expect AI and virtue to be different than human virtue. So the example I used earlier about temperance, that unless AI were to somehow be able to increase the amount of electricity a computer uses to the point where it blows a fuse, but the technology itself is already built to not allow that. A virtue like temperance doesn't seem to make sense if you don't have a body that needs and expends calories. So I think it's a silly example, but I think that it's one that, say, one of our, what Christians would consider a cardinal virtue would not be present in an artificial intelligence.
Good, thank you.
As a non-academic and a lay person, I am very impressed with both the breadth and the depth of the work that you've done on this. It's really quite mind-boggling to see all that you've done. My question is, how does all this research and all the information you are gathering translate to the person in the pew, the man on the woman on the street? And what are you envisioning to make this expansive so that we, as the people day to day who are dealing, whether we want to or not, with AI issues, this can be helpful or useful to us?
I think that's a great question, and it's one that that academics struggle with, because in a lot of ways it is a very different tool set to do academic research, and then to be able to take that research and translate it into something that is digestible by the average person. That's why I think something like public theology is so important, because it does that. It says, here's what's happening in the academy, and here's why you should care about it, and what you need to be thinking about. So I think that to answer that, I would say that our relationship with AI and faith is going to be an important part of that, because now they are not just academics, but they are also religious leaders, they are lay people, they are tech folks that have a variety of or lack thereof of philosophical or theological background. And I think continuing to partner with them and to disseminate information and to try and build connections, both internationally and with people who are in tech companies, I think would be an important step forward. Now, the trouble with all of that is that it's a lot harder to do that when the funding isn't readily available. Because now that the grant is wrapped up, the money from Templeton is also wrapped up. So that's always a challenge with taking these projects and sort of how do we continue to push it forward. But I recognize the importance of the question you're asking, absolutely. Yeah.
You mentioned that this work would be, there's a special issue of the journal Theology and Science, but is there going to be a publication of a book with these papers in it that we could study and read and discuss at church?
So not the papers that have already been published. So there are a variety of papers that have been published in at least a half a dozen journals, maybe a dozen journals, and those you would have to track down. The papers in the special issue of Theology and Science that are coming out are going to be open access. Funds of the grant have made that so that we're able to have them be freely accessible. And I'm hoping that they're all out of the publishing house, so I'm hoping that they'll be published in July or August at the latest. And then we are also putting together an edited volume that would be a book that would have anywhere from about probably 12 to 18 chapters. Again, we're finalizing full list, and that would be something that could be sold and could be purchased for discussion groups or classrooms or things like that.
I think the discussion in the churches would be very important, and especially when this is coming hard and fast at us from all angles, including these chips for our brains. So I hope that we can have access to that and advertise it, maybe do something proactive to get it into the churches.
Yeah, well, we also have the YouTube videos from all of the conference presentations. Now, it might be a hard thing to step into, given that people may not have read those papers ahead of time. But there is at least some type of video source where scholars are doing some type of presentation about their work, and then there's dialogue and questioning between participants. So that could be another way of getting people into the conversation.
Okay, oh, that sounds great. Thank you.
Yeah, Thomas, please.
Thank you. Thank you so much, everyone that's there. And thank you, Braden, for this summary. I wanted to ask just as a logistical question if those slides would be available to us, just so that's such a nice overview of the work that's been done, and that would be really helpful just for networking. And I see some names that I'm hoping to follow up with.
Yeah, we'll get them up on the BEI portion of the CTNS website.
Perfect. And then I just wanted to add, in terms of what I think, one thing that I really noticed that VAI accomplished is a interreligious and cross-cultural set of projects that I don't think I've seen elsewhere come together the way that it did. In these three conferences as kind of a collection, and even within each conference, I think it had a breadth that was uh, just very suggestive of what different types of dialogue could happen, where AI is not just an object of study, but is actually a provocation that will kind of elucidate aspects of religion and religious traditions and virtue that otherwise might have been difficult to articulate. So I really appreciate this grant and this kind of body of work for accomplishing that, because I don't think I've seen anything that could claim to do that the way it has.
Well, thank you. I think that's part of CTNS being a part of the Graduate Theological Union, is that's we're in a place where there are people from a variety of traditions, and we're always learning from one another. And I think that's something we wanted to bring into the conference. And again, the wide variety of philosophical and theological understandings of virtue, as well as the geographic cultural representation we had was great. I mean, I actually would have loved to have a little bit more. We had some initial yeses from folks that turned into no's that would have given us some additional perspective, but I think given what we had, yeah, I would happily stand by what we did. Thank you.
Just back to your comment on the temperance, like, of course, like you mentioned that there's a difference between AI virtue and the human virtue, and there's certain aspects are not overlap, but there's also the overlap. Like, I think your example of temperance can be framed differently. Like ChatGPT, for instance, it can exhibit temperance by limiting its outputs, right? That could be a different form of temperance, and then that can be rendered by the adjusting a protocol. So what do you think?
Not consumption, but output.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that if going back to the work you've done about image of God, I think there's that question of how much does AI bear our image, and can AI bear the image of God as well? Those conversations are all intertwined, and I think where you come down on that relationship between the image of God and the image of humans and AI is probably also going to affect your understanding of how human-like AI virtues are going to be.
One more. You've used temperance in your examples, but of course, temperance is one of the four cardinal virtues you get from reason, along with prudence, justice, and fortitude. What about the theological virtues, faith, hope, love? Same question about AI and humans.
We get a lot trickier there because, at least in the Christian tradition, those are infused virtues.
Exactly.
So I can't acquire those per se.
Right.
And so that fundamentally raises the question of, would God choose to infuse AI with the theological virtues? And I think Mark Graves' work is a good example of trying to engage with that.
What do you think?
I think that if the answer were to be yes, the question would be to what end or what purpose? And I think that a prerequisite for that would likely be that AI would need to be relational. So, I mean, we can we can think of what Bronner says with evolution, that here God is constantly showering the world with grace and God's self-communication. And it took the evolution of beings that are able to, quote unquote, pick up that phone and answer back. And I think that God would likely not infuse AI with the theological virtues unless they were also capable of answering back.
Right.
And I would say that we're not at a point where that is currently possible, but I think could theoretically be possible in the future.
Braden?
Yep.
Does that mean that until AI can be relational, there's not much possibility of them becoming virtuous? Is that what you're saying?
Well, I think I would say in the example of the theological virtues, I don't see them being infused with the theological virtues if they're not capable of being in relationship. Because what does one who is not in relationship hope for or have faith in? But I think that AI could still have intellectual virtues in the way that it's processing information or the way in which it disseminates information. But yeah, I think that I personally would say that right now we're seeing one of our papers use the term virtue by proxy to say that AI does not have virtue right now, but it exhibits the virtue of its programmers, the people that created it for a purpose. And so I would tend to agree that I think that's where we tend to see that now. But there were people who participated who would say that no, I think it's even possible right now for us to think of AI as having virtues in limited ways. And I would say that especially using Confucian role ethics, that seems to be one way, because in the Confucian tradition, your responsibilities and duties are dictated in part by the relationships that you're in and the role that you have. And so while AI might not be relational, it still has roles in the way in which they interact with society. And so in those contexts, it could be virtuous or not virtuous. I think an easy example of that might be the military. Are we using lethal autonomous weapons in a way that are virtuous or not, for example?
Thank you.
Great. Well,
Braden,
oh yeah, good. Sure, go for it.
Well, speaking of biology, we are primates. And as I understand it, one of the qualities of a primate is that we like to copy other primates. And the old adage, monkey see, monkey do. And so we see that in the Republican Party. So I'm wondering if AI doesn't have the DNA of a primate, and all we can do is we can program into that AI what we think we would like to have in that, without the biological inherited over millennia DNA. What possibility is there of having us make AI in our own image?
Well, I think that even without a biological component to coding, I think it's still very much possible. That the way in which we approach problems certainly affects the way in which algorithms are created. Large language models are statistical models based on replicating existing literature. We feed everything that's been written into ChatGPT's training data, and then we say monkey. Well, 25% of the time, C is the next word that occurs in text after monkey. So, 25% of the time, ChatGPT might say, I'm just making that statistic up, but so 25% of the time, ChatGPT would then say monkey C as the output. So I think that very much, anything that's trained on data that humans create is likely to inherit the same type of biases that we have. There's a great example of Amazon had a hiring algorithm. They wanted to replace, HR workers. and say, well, we want to be able to identify the top candidates. And they fed their algorithm 10 years worth of data. Well, at that time, the overwhelming majority of hires were men. And so the algorithm started rejecting resumes that had prominent women's colleges as where they went to college. So, there's no biological component to that algorithm, and yet it is still, taking on the bias of the creator and saying that, well, based on the information I've been given, this is clearly not a good candidate. So how we're defining a good candidate is not just who's been hired over the past 10 years, but also we need to think about, what that means.
Yes.
Can I ask Ted a question?
Sure.
Ted, you're a wonderful Lutheran. You make the distinction between cardinal and theological virtues.
Between-
You make the distinction between cardinal and theological virtues.
Yes, that's correct.
So what do you think about AI being capable of theological virtues?
Well, I really think your question is good.
Repeat the question.
The question is with the distinction between cardinal virtues and theological virtues, how are the theological virtues relevant in this case? And as Braden said, the theological virtues, faith, hope, and love, are infused by divine grace. Then Braden, in citing Karl Rahner, I think, suggested that maybe we have to have a capacity to be receptive to divine grace. Well, DK's paper and a couple of the other papers suggest that if AI actually becomes intelligence, that intelligence would include a receptivity of religious consciousness that would be receptive to the transcendent. So if DK turns out to be correct in this prediction, then we can expect AI to be receptive to the divine virtues. But the Holy Spirit would still have to act in order to impart faith, hope, and love, even if it were expected. That's my kind of first thought. Now, what are your thoughts? You're posing the question. I'll bet you got a hypothesis, do you?
Yeah, I think I'd go along with you, but I'd probably be more skeptical of AI having the theological virtues, because I'm not sure how
Please.
the theological virtues of faith and love versus temperance, prudence.
Would you please yell at your wife?
Thank you, Ted.
Okay, fine.
Oh, good.
I think you're right, Ted, that it's unlikely that AI would have capacity for the theological virtues of faith and love. But it's likely they'd have the capacity for the four cardinal virtues, prudence, justice, temperance, and fortitude. But I think your point as a Lutheran to say even the cardinal virtues require God's infusion is interesting. Would Luther have gone that? I thought he was rejecting it.
Actually, I think that'd be more medieval Roman Catholicism, where God's grace as a potential for living the virtuous life is given with creation rather than redemption.
Right. And that's why Luther would reject that, wouldn't he?
Yeah, Luther was more on the side of the Holy Spirit working on the side of redemption. And Luther, I wasn't concerned with the virtues as a list, but with the human heart being turned toward love of neighbor. And once your heart is turned towards love of neighbor and you're dedicated to meeting the needs of the neighbor, then the virtues find their own equilibrium. You don't pursue. The Lutherans say it's impossible to pursue a virtue and attain it because it's a selfish impulse to pursue virtue, and the virtue is just the opposite of being selfish. So the Lutherans find yourself tied in this paradox. And so the Lutherans' way out of it is to love the neighbor for the sake of the neighbor, and then the virtues come along. But you know, that is so complicated. A preacher in the pulpit would be there all day trying to get this across. Whereas, let me just say, I think we're on better ground as a Roman Catholic for this because there's this first grace, the actual grace, which is impelling us, inviting us towards the cardinal virtues.
I agree.
Yeah,
I just wanted to say very thank you all that especially Bob and Ted, and especially to Braden and Changin too, for just organizing all these scholarly works and follow-ups. And with regard to the possibility of theological virtues, whether they could have one day or not, I was approaching from the perspective of evolutionary studies. So ever since we had come to have theological virtues, and before that we could have religious behaviors and religiosity in general. So probably the possibility of having theological virtues by artificial intelligence might be a matter of how we build this artificial intelligence, rather the possibility itself there. So I was thinking of some embodiment and with soft robotics and the direction of humanoid development might be one day giving us some kind of a chance of having very human-like artificial intelligence and robots. So in that sense, as a theologian and religious study scholar, we have to be careful in terms of the direction of the artificial intelligence development, rather than we just put the conclusion at the beginning. And that was my short, how do I say, gratitude and thinking and thought before I leave for my family business, since here in Korea a Saturday morning. So most of weekdays I'm spending my time at my university. So I have to have family business on Saturday. Otherwise, my wife is going to kick me out of my house. So once again, I'm very grateful to all of you, and I would like to have, hoping to have another chance to get involved with this kind of conference later.
It's a great virtue to love your family.
Yes, yes. Probably artificial intelligence in the present moment, they will not have this kind of virtue, but they will not have wife too.
DK, it's Karen. Would you greet your wife for me?
Oh, will do, Karen.
Thanks, DK. Yeah, I think we'll go ahead and we'll leave it there. Thank you, those of you who are joining us on Zoom for joining us virtually, and thank you for those of you who are here in person. We do have some refreshments so we can recept and celebrate. Take care, everyone. We'll be in touch.